Good morning, everyone. I am glad to be here amongst the living this morning. And what we need to do today is I promised some people that I was going to break down for them. A lot of people have been asking me how do weigh stations exactly work, and these are new drivers that are basically asking me this. And one of the guys that asked me to do a video on this is a guy that's interested in becoming a driver. He wanted to understand what the purpose and function of a weigh station is. So to make this easy, I wanted to do a video for everyone. And when I do a video, I try to do what my parents taught me to do. My parents were very religious, and they brought me up in a very religious environment. So they always taught me, especially my dad, had a belief that the surface things that are on the Bible, the things that they teach you every day, are incomplete subjects. The Bible is more than what someone can just teach you from a platform, and that you need to really get inside of it and search and look and come to a deeper understanding of what's in that book. And I try to apply that philosophy to everything I do. So whatever it is, if I'm going to get into it, I try to become the ultimate professional at it, and I try to have as much understanding as at that particular subject as I possibly can. So what I did, since even though I drove 10 years, my knowledge of weigh stations was limited to my personal experience from having to go through the weigh stations and be subject to DOT inspections, level 1, level 2, level 3. And we'll make different videos as we go along that will explain the difference in those things. But what I did, I contacted a DOT officer and had him explain to me the functions of his particular weigh station. And I was fascinated. I was really fascinated by the technology that they have and by the capabilities that they have, and where science and technology has taken every aspect of our lives, no matter what the industry is and no matter what they're doing. So you guys, and I'm primarily talking to truckers, those that already know what a weigh station is. You guys go through these weigh stations all the time. I used to go through, maybe on an average load from Fort Mill, South Carolina to Dallas, Texas, I probably entered 11 to 12 weigh stations within that 2-day journey. And I never understood in depth how their systems work, because I basically didn't have to. I never failed a DOT inspection. I never was out of compliance in going through those weigh stations. So I never really had to worry about the ramifications thereof. But it's amazing how they work. Let me give you an example of what the DOT officer, and a big shout out to him for giving me this information. He told me that there is a virtual monitor that communicates with a weigh-in motion monitor. So when you're driving down the highway, even before you get to a weigh station, a lot of times you'll come across a scale on the road. And what that does, it transmits to that particular weigh station already your different parameters, and according to different I'm sorry, not different parameters, but different configurations of your weight and things like that. And sometimes they even have the ability to know the difference in the length of your axles and things like that. Anyway, The main things he told me were this. He says, whenever you're going through the weigh station, follow that speed limit. Whatever the posted limit is that is posted for you going through that weigh station, he said, do not go under that limit and do not go over that limit, because they have speed sensors throughout the entire weigh station. And sometimes the length between the time you enter the weigh station and the time you actually get back on the highway, sometimes depending, can be a half a mile to a mile, because they're measuring different things. They're trying to, the computers are trying to determine, and the sensors are trying to determine different things about your truck. So that was the first thing he said. Do not go under the speed limit. Do not go over the speed limit. Follow that precisely, because he said if you go under that speed limit, it will automatically trigger parameters inside the computer, and 9 times out of 10 it's going to pull you in to go across the scale. He said don't go over the speed limit, definitely, because that will automatically set off different parameters that they have and set within the computer, and it will trigger the computer to tell you to drive across the scale. So there's different parameters that they set in their computer, high and low. And when you are outside those different parameters, it automatically triggers a response from the computer. For instance, he says their particular computer is set on a parameter of 76,000 pounds. So he said, if you are, or if the gross weight of your vehicle exceeds 76,000 pounds, and we all know what the gross weight of a vehicle consists of. It consists of your tractor, your trailer, your fuel, your total gross weight. So he says their parameters set at their weigh station are set at 76,000 pounds. So that means if your truck weight exceeds that, it's going to trigger an automatic response in their system to have you drive across the scale instead of taking the bypass. And that really said something to me, because my whole driving career, that may be why I through the latter part of my career, I did not have to go across the scales a lot. I tried to be under, if I could be right at 20,000 pounds. I always tried. Sometimes I would get to 30, 35, and sometimes, every blue moon I'd get in the 40s. But as I got smarter and got a little bit more wise, I tried to keep my weight low. And he says that's beneficial, because that keeps you from having to drive across the scales. Now we're talking about modern scales. We're not talking about these old systems that have been out there for a long time. We're talking about a more up-to-date weigh station. Some people call them scale houses. Okay? So he said their system is set at 76,000 pounds. If you don't exceed that, 9 times out of 10, if there's no more issues with your truck that the computer can visibly see from its sensors, then you'll get the bypass. That doesn't mean necessarily that you won't have to pull into the weigh station. What that means, I'm talking about weigh stations that have a lane that makes you go across the scale, and one that allows you to bypass the scale at the DOT officer's discretion. Okay. Now he was telling me that his particular weigh station can weigh or identify, they identify each and every vehicle that comes through the weigh station, whether you're a truck, car, whatever. They can identify what you are. But he was saying that they have the ability to intake 6,000 to 7,000 trucks a day going in one direction. So if you have a northbound weigh station and an eastbound weigh station, which you will see a lot of times, one on each side, that's a total of 12,000 trucks that they can get the information off of. And that blew my mind. That's a lot of trucks coming through within a day. And he said their particular scale was, I think he said 76 feet long. So it could it could, and they said that they could weigh trucks, and that they have weighed trucks that are like over 280,000 pounds in weight, and that blew my mind. I thought that was awesome. And as we already know, most weigh stations can take a weight of your steers, your drive, and your tandems. So we already know things like that. And he was saying some trucks have 8, 9, 10, 11, axles, and he said they're able to weigh them all. And I asked him a question. I says, well, which scale is pretty dependable at these truck stops? You'll see the most popular one is the CAT scale. When you get that scale ticket, it usually says, certified CAT scale, and you feel more confident because you went to his CAT scale. He said that don't mean a damn. He said he's seen them off several times, especially when a truck has multiple axles. He said that's when you tend to see them sometimes be 1,600 pounds off and things like that. And I said, what? He said, yeah, we've had that come through plenty of times where trucks have been overweight. They'll come in with their CAT scale ticket, and they're surprised to find out that they are still overweight. So I thought that was pretty interesting, guys. The main thing he kept emphasizing, though, is maintain your speed when you're coming through that weigh station, because that will automatically trigger a response in that computer. And once it does that, then, it's basically out of their hands. So everything's preset. With a lot of times we think they're pulling us in purposefully, or that they've picked us out of hundreds of trucks that's coming through. The computers picked you out. Let's see, what else did he have to say? He said by the time if you're on the highway getting ready to approach the weigh station, and there are scales in the highway, embedded in the highway, that you run over even before you start to enter the weigh station. He says by the time your front axle has hit that scale, he said when your front axle hits that scale, and by the time your last axle gets off that scale or passes that scale, he said we know everything about your truck that we need to know, besides who you are personally. He says they know your weight, your height, the distance between each of your axles, your total length, the weight of each axle, how wide you are, and how tall you are. He said, so all these super truckers that have in their mindset that they're going to drive at night because they are overweight, or they're too tall, or they're too wide, he said it does not add up anymore. He said because those sensors, which are laser operated, he said they're laser operated, detects everything. And he says what it does, it triggers and sends an automatic signal or alert to that computer. And he says all they have to do is look at the computer and go up to the computer and touch your vehicle, the image of your truck on the screen. And that computer automatically will show them where you are over height at or too wide. He said it could be nighttime. They don't have to go out there and physically search for where the spot of where your truck is out of compliance. Now that blew my mind. He said they already know when they walk out the door, so they can walk right to it. If you're too high, for instance, he said if you are carrying like an excavator or a car hauler or something like that, they know the peak and the point where you're too high, according to the computer. So they'll go right to that spot. If you're too wide, they'll know exactly the point where you're too wide at, the point in your load of where you're too wide at. So technology, man, for all you super truckers that swear people don't know what they're doing these days and they don't know how to beat the system, you can't beat the system. You can beat the system in some specific areas because the technology has not caught up yet in those particular areas, but don't think you can whoop the system in its totality. So that was one of the things that blew my mind. He said one of the things they really check for is the permits and your registration. So he said if you're like doing an oversized load and your permit gave you the permission to be 14 in your parameters, in your dimensions, and you're 15, then that's a problem. He said then they automatically, that makes them home in on a lot of things. And he said that is one of the things they check, the permits. He said make sure when you're getting your permits from the permitting office that the permits are consistent with what you're carrying and the parameters are correct and the dimensions are correct. He said because that is one of he said they've made several mistakes in permitting offices where they've actually where the driver has applied for one thing and the permit actually says something different. Someone in the permit office made the mistake. So I said, I said, does that happen quite a bit? He said, yeah, that happens quite a bit. He said, but it is the responsibility of the driver to make sure that everything he requested and the information that's on the permit is accurate. I said, okay. And I asked him, I says, okay, so what about the pre-pass? I says, if we as drivers get the pre-pass, does that help us more? Because I had them in my truck. And sometimes I guess now they're called driveways. A lot of them come with the Qualcomms and the Omnitracks. So he says, yeah, they're a huge help. And I said, why? Why do you guys automatically trust a vehicle that has a pre-pass or driveways? He said, well, he said, first of all, the intention, the whole purpose of the pre-pass was to keep the way stations from getting filled and clogged up from a bunch of trucks that were light in weight. He said more so they're worried about the trucks that are overweight and the trucks that are heavy, because those are the ones, because the whole purpose of the way stations, the whole purpose of even having to go through a way stations is to protect the roads. That's number one, and to protect the safety of the community and the roads. So he said that's the whole purpose, to make sure all trucks are in compliance with the weight. So he said what the pre-pass was designed to do was to those trucks that consistently haul light freight were not necessarily subject to the same scrutiny that those were that were heavier in weight. So the pre-pass was originally designed to for those types of trucks that were carrying lighter weight, so they could get the bypass and didn't have to come through the scale as much. So he said that there is a 10 to 12% chance that if you got that you'll get pulled into the way station. He said that's just the way it is. He said if you have an easy pass or you have that system set up on your Omnitracks and things like that, he said it's a good thing to have, because more and more you'll get that bypass light and you'll hear your Qualcomm or your easy make a certain sound that automatically tells you can bypass the way station. So he said that is a good thing to have. But he said the intended purpose of that was for trucks that pulled lighter weight. Okay, so I said, wow, that's interesting. I learned a lot of things by talking to this particular DOT officer. And I was really impressed by the sophistication of their equipment and their computerized equipment that they have inside. Now, we had a lengthy conversation, and he was telling me even more in depth of how the inspection bays have changed and what they can detect and what their automations are now in the inspection bays when your truck actually is pulled into one of those to do an inspection. So I'm going to keep this particular video focused on just going across the scales and the things you need to be aware of. Okay? So another thing he mentioned to me, that there are certain DOT numbers that are on what's called a hot list. So as you're coming through the way station and your DOT number gets inputted in the system, there are certain DOT numbers that are hot listed that they look out for, and that will automatically trigger a response from the system to pull this driver in and scrutinize the paperwork, to scrutinize the maintenance of the truck and different things like that. That I already kind of figured out. No one ever told me that, but I kind of put 2 and 2 together on that. He said if you blow by a weigh station in their particular state, it's $1,000 fine. And a lot of times they'll write you a ticket, and it can make your CSA score go up. Now, does everyone know what is a CSA score? What does CSA stand for? CSA stands for compliance, safety, and accountability. So each driver, each commercial driver has a CSA score, and the crazy thing about a CSA score is it's in reverse. 100 is bad, it's horrible. 0 is better. So he got to telling me about CSA scores. I always knew about CSA score, and every driver will tell you that different violations will impact your CSA score. But really, what is your CSA score? And what determines, what factors make up, or what is the composition of things that make up your total CSA scores? I found that very interesting, and I'll talk about that on another video. But there's like several basic parts to a CSA score that all drivers need to be aware of, and that they understand. And I asked him, I says, okay, well, what's, all of us at some point or another are going to have a failed inspection or do something if we drive long enough. He says anything 50 and over is horrible, and it triggers automatic things within the system for you to have an audit or an investigation or an inspection and things like that. He says you want to try to keep it in the 30s and down. He said the lesser you get towards like 0, he said the better. He says, but really when you start getting up there to 30, 50 and above, 50 is the trigger, really. He says once you get to 50, you're going to have a lot more things you have to deal with. So I tried to take as many notes as I possibly could while I was talking to him, because I knew that I was going to come back and relay this information to you. So now in another video, I'm going to break down what he told me about the CSA score, which stands for compliance, safety, and accountability. And he told me the 7 basic parts of the CSA, and he told me to go back and do my research and look up the different things associated with the CSA score and the SMS, which is part of the CSA program. And I did that, and it really blew my mind as far as how in depth these things were. So guys, I hope this video helps you understand a little bit more about how a weigh station works, a modern day weigh station. Don't think you can fool them. Don't think you can be an outlaw and drive at night and you'll have a higher success rate of getting through these weigh stations and these scale houses. And the more that the technology catches up with the driving world, the more your thinking should adapt to the to get with the process of that. I have to maintain my vehicle and run my vehicle appropriately. I will even get into more details later on how now some of the sensors and some of the AI features that they have along the highway lets them know if your tires are underflated without you pulling into the weigh station and without them physically checking your tires. It is crazy. AI has the ability to let them know if you're drowsy, if you're sleepy while you're going down the road. AI has the ability to let them know if you're on the cell phone talking, if both of your hands are on the steering wheel, if you have your seatbelt on. So it is so much that I need to share with you guys, but I can't do it all in one video. I just wanted to let you know the things that I thought were the most important things that all drivers needed to be aware of. In the next video, we will break down the different components to a CSA score so that you can operate with more knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the less issues you have, the less your CSA score goes up, the less your insurance rates go up, you know, things of that nature. It's all intended to save us money. It's all intended for us to keep compliant. And the more we help each other, the more knowledge we have, the better off we'll all be. So I will talk to you guys next time in the next video. In the meantime, take care and be safe, everyone. Bye.